Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and as the deadline loomed, the only candidate standing in the leadership contest to replace Liz Truss after 48 days of the most miserable premiership ever was Rishi Sunak. Johnson had backed out, claiming, he had totally had the nominations, but certainly at the time of recording, no independent verification of this. Mordaunt then backed out at literally the last minute as she seemed to fall short. But details a little bit sketchy on that too. But what is certain is that Rishi Sunak will be Prime Minister probably by the time this video goes live. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, first of all, I don't think Rishi Sunak will be a good Prime Minister. I think he's going to inflict quite a lot of harm on the people of this country. But I do not believe that any Tory alternative to him would have been better. Until we can remove the party from government, he may well be the best we could actually get, as grim as that is. But it is worth noting, we have our first non-white Prime Minister. I could note the Tories crowing about their 3 female leaders and now a non-white leader, in stark contrast to Labour's unbroken line of white men, and point out that Labour do legislate for rights for those who are not straight white men. What have the Tories done? Gay marriage, fair enough, important legislation. But that's it. That's it in 12 years, 12 and a half years. What legislation have they produced specifically to make it easier for women to exist in our patriarchy? Nothing. Well done on letting 3 women lead the party, but what about the other 34 million? Same for those who aren't white. What legislation have the Tories enacted to make life fairer for the ones who aren't privately educated millionaires? But I will say this. It's objectively a good thing that we've got a non-white Prime Minister. So much of aspiration in any society is role models. So important. If people see nothing but female nurses, they don't think that men can be nurses. If they see nothing but male scientists, they don't think science is for girls. And if people only see white people in senior positions in government, they don't think there's much point in going through the many trials and tribulations that a life in politics will absolutely throw at you if there's perceived to be a fairly low glass ceiling, unless you are white. So it's actually a very big moment, and I've got no problem giving the Tories credit for it. Yes, it was done against the wishes of the party members, but more than half of Tory MPs backed him. And these are Tory MPs who deliberately sided with racists and xenophobes to deliver Brexit. They would not have picked him if they thought they needed a lot of racists to win the election. They wanted a leader who would reverse their fortunes in the polls, and they did not see his skin colour or his religion, come to that, as a barrier to that. And that's encouraging. Also, it may well be that Sunak has only done this for selfish reasons. I don't know what his reasons are. Maybe he just wanted his name in the history books and he doesn't actually have to achieve anything as Prime Minister to be assured of that now. He is the first non-white Prime Minister. He's probably not going to be the first non-white Prime Minister to win a general election, but he is the first non-white Prime Minister, and there will inevitably be some commemoration of that in the years to come, not immediately, of course, but in many years' time, a bust or a statue, something like that to mark the occasion. So his place in the history books will be assured. But regardless of his motivation, it's still a positive step. But that's my praise for him in the moment. Let's discuss how he's going to be a really crap Prime Minister now. So let's look at the problem that any Tory leader would always have had before we complicate it with others. The Tories won their majority in 2019 with a one-trick pony. They appealed to working class voters in knackered former industrial towns, the so-called Red Wall, with their get Brexit done and levelling up spending promises, whilst telling traditional Tory voters to vote blue to keep Corbyn out. That was it. That was what it did. And it worked, but it doesn't anymore. The traditional Tory voters aren't that keen on high taxes. And the Red Wall voters aren't very keen on the fact that the spending doesn't appear to have materialised. And Sunak won't dodge this because he's the Chancellor who oversaw most of it. The strategic option for the party would be to maybe accept that the next election is going to be very, very tough and focus on consolidating their power base instead of these contradictory policies that will be needed. because that would mean forgetting about the red wall voters who lent their votes for the undeliverable promises. At that point, the conflict in policy dies down a bit. Problem is, this means abandoning quite a lot of red wall Tory MPs who may not be that keen on not even being given a fighting chance at the next election. And there are too many of them for Sunak to ignore if they decide to get stroppy. Now, they may not. They may say, well, we had a good few years. Fair enough. But I strongly suspect that's not the case. That being said, there's not really a lot Sunak can do. I mean, during the first leadership contest this summer, he was recorded with Tory members. He was recorded boasting about diverting public funds from poorer areas to wealthy areas. The very opposite of levelling up. And this video is doing the rounds again, as you would expect, and it will be a big feature of the general election campaign if he is leading the Tories into it. Nobody will believe him if he even attempts to back levelling up policies. If he can't deliver before the election, that's what voters will judge him on, his delivery, not his promises. If he doesn't deliver, few voters will believe that he will do so after the election. Then we've got the current economic situation. Sunak can try and blame Truss and Kwarteng a bit, but it's tricky because the last thing he needs right now is blue-on-blue attacks. It may be his aim to get through the recession, then go for an election in 2024, maybe the autumn even, where he can claim that he steered us through it, like Johnson did with COVID, even though a load of people died and it's still here. But it might work. But as people will still be suffering the effects of his policies, they're unlikely to be fooled by headlines of technical growth percentages in large numbers. Besides, for that plan to work, he'd have to be able to choose the time of the election. If he can't unite pretty much all Tory MPs behind him, then it's general election time much sooner. It remains to be seen, but if Tory MPs do decide to pull the plug on Sunak, no option left but for a snap election. So Sunak needs to get his MPs behind him. To do that, I think two main priorities. First, placate the ERG in some way. These are the guys who might conceivably trigger an election if they don't get what they want. I know Johnson's supporters are likely to try and trip him up, but it's not in their interest to trigger an election right now. The ERG, they're a little bit tapped. Other MPs, as I say, of whatever faction, very unlikely to. They'll wait to see if Sunak can actually improve their poll ratings. The ERG are political terrorists, so they need to be thrown a bone. It might be possible, depends what the ERG actually demand. On Northern Ireland, bear in mind that Truss's approach was generally supported and was making enough positive noises about a deal to generate a bit of hope. I don't know if it would have come to anything, but there's no reason for Sunak not to appoint the same ministers to the Northern Ireland office and carry that policy on. Both of those ministers had publicly backed Sunak before the deadline anyway. At the very least, it gives Sunak time to work on shoring up his support. Then the second priority, a big one, reversing the polling gap with Labour. Now, if he could do that, his position will be strong, of course. And even the members who may at the moment not approve of the fact that he's been appointed without their say-so will back him. The far-right commentators currently trashing him, which I'm sure has got nothing to do with the colour of his skin, will not have very much to pin on him if he actually does make the party more popular. It'll also cut the rug from underneath the feet of Reform UK, who seem to be sniffing around for defections at the moment. But if he can't close the gap significantly, he won't be able to secure his authority within the party. Johnson's supporters will just dismiss another failed experiment and insist this is why their buffoon should never have been forced out in the first place and why he should have been brought back at the first opportunity. I suppose after this, though, by the time this has happened, we'll find out what happened with the Privileges Committee investigation. That's very soon. But it all hinges on the polling figures. So how likely is Sunak to be able to turn it around? Well, let's consider that Labour had been expecting Sunak to replace Johnson since the start of the year. So they'd been preparing their lines of attack on him. In fact, there was a little period, in the spring, where it looked like Starmer had got bored with Boris Johnson and he just used PMQ's questions to attack Rishi Sunak, getting ready for when Sunak took over. Wednesday should give us a bit of an insight into what Labour think are his main weaknesses. Then there's the austerity that his government's going to inflict on us next Monday. That's not going to be popular. Widespread industrial action still in full swing, in fact growing. NHS collapsing badly. This winter is going to be devastating. Sunak, of course, wants to give it away to American medical companies. He's always off to America meeting with them. But it won't be easy to do in the current climate. There'll be winter blackouts for 3 hours at a time on some evenings. How damaging that is depends on how often. I suppose if it happens once or twice, it's not good, but they'll get away with it. If it happens like once or twice a week, that's a problem for them. Much will depend on Sunak's powers of communication as well. Can he appeal to key target voters on a personal level? Has he got any charisma? He won't have anything else going for him, so Tories will have to hope so. After whatever period of time the Tories decide to give him to prove himself has passed, there'll be 3 key metrics to watch out for. The first is the obvious one, the thing that will be splashed across the media. Where are the Tories and Labour in the polls, the overall polls? If Labour still have a large lead, let's say 20 points or more, then that's really bad news for Sunak. Second, where does Sunak stand personally with Starmer in a head-to-head between the two personalities? If Starmer is seen as being more popular, having the higher approval rating as leader, that's a massive problem for Sunak as well. Third, which will be the party that is seen as best at managing the economy? That is absolutely crucial. If Labour are in the lead on all 3 metrics, as they are at the moment, right now they are. If they are still in the lead on all 3 metrics when the MPs have decided that Sunak's had enough times, it'll be curtains. The Tories will then have a choice between either trying to replace the leader again or just going for a general election to save themselves the humiliation of a bloodbath in the local elections. Because if they get to May and they haven't, and Sunak's not made much of an impact, I'd expect him to make a bit of an impact. He's surely not going to be as bad as Truss. But if he hasn't made much of an impact and they get to May, those local elections are going to be devastating for them. And then there'll be no way back. I mean, there probably isn't anyway. But at that point, no way back. So if Sunak can recapture, however, 1 or 2 of those metrics, then he will get more time, I suppose. But his first big test will, of course, be PMQs this Wednesday, then trying to get the ERG to behave themselves. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.